I-35 is a rule that came in 2000. Gordon Brown brought it in a long time ago, it's basically a way of taxing freelance contractors who use a company to provide personal services through. And how it worked was, if you had to decide, am I working like an employee or am I working like a self-employed person? And if you thought you were working like an employee, you'd have to look at case law and consider things like, do I decide how I work? Have I got the right to substitute somebody else in? Am I taking financial risk? After you've made those decisions, if you decide you're caught, you aspire this rule. If you're working like an employee, you had to basically work out pay as you earn and national insurance and all your company income. Very expensive. And if you thought you were like a self-employed person, you could just pay yourself small salary, dividends, maybe split dividends with a spouse, like any other company. And so fairly naturally people were leaning towards hoping they weren't caught, looking at ways of getting the contract drafted so they weren't caught by this rule, getting advice off their accountants, negotiating with their agencies to give them nice friendly clauses in their contract. HMRC or the Treasury decided this isn't working very well. We're not getting the taxes we thought we would get. So in 2017, they brought in a law that said the contractor no longer decides this if he's working or she's working in the public sector. Instead, the public sector body has to decide. And if the public sector body decides they're caught, then when they pay them the salary or the sales income, they will deduct pay as you earn and national insurance from the sales income. And what that led to was a big sort of migration of anybody who could away from the public sector into the private sector, because people didn't want to have the tax deducted, and there were certain incentives for the public sector bodies to say people were caught by this rule. Anyway, in 2021, the same rule that had hit the public sector in 2017 hit the private sector. So from 2021, but it applied to only big, if you like, end clients. We call them big hirers of contractors with turnover of more than 10 million, balance sheet value of more than 5 million. So the banks, the big utilities, they had to apply the new rule. And again, they were encouraged by legislation to tell their contractors that they were caught by this rule because there was a risk to the hirer, the end client, to them if they said the contractors weren't caught by the rule. So they were encouraged. They were supposed to apply the rule fairly, but there was a bit of intimidation in the legislation. So since 2021, anyone working through a big end client or a public sector body hasn't had a lot to say about their I-35 status. And in fact, what's happened in reality is a lot of freelance contractors have been told you can't even use your company if you want to work through us. You have to use an umbrella company. But for freelance contractors who are still working through in the private sector for a small, less than 10 million turnover hirer or company, they still have to make this choice. And that's where accountants like us come in. We can give advice. We can talk to agencies to maybe or review agency contracts and maybe make suggestions to make them more IR35 friendly, so long as that's accurate in how somebody works. But we do that because there's so few contractors who now have a say in how they work. That's happening much less than it used to, but we still do it for people.